Hey, so I've been having a little bit of fun with the VR headset. So you probably notice I'm a bit more of a synthesizer channel, but my day to day, I usually work more with virtual reality and immersive technologies and bringing that into a space. But Meta has Meta Horizons, and recently they opened up a desktop editor, so I can start bringing in my 3D models and all that sort of stuff. But sound was a bit lacking. They did have a way where you had to internally plug a virtual cable, and then you could hit record on a recorder gizmo and bring the sound in that way. It was a little bit less intuitive, but recently in a new update, they've released a feature where you can drag and drop sounds into Meta Horizons, create assets from them. So it really opens up this space for sound design, and really I haven't shown the main way I use these synthesizers is to create sound effects and all that good stuff to liven up these digital environments. So today I'm not going to focus on the sounds themselves. I did use my lovely Mode grandmother to create the drone effects for this environment, but what I want to focus on is getting the sounds out of your door and then into Meta Horizon. So enough talking, let's get straight into it. So just before we jump into Meta Horizons or my door, I think there's a little bit of housekeeping that needs to happen. Not too much theory, but it will help when you go to drag and drop that file in. It's going to work the right time the first time. So the two main file types that we're dealing with, we have a WAV, which is a sort of lossless file. They're quite large, but they don't lose information. And then we have an OGG opus. So this is another type of file that we can put our information in, but is sort of like a lossy type. So it's a lot smaller, like an MP3 player if you're familiar with iPods, but you do have some little artifacts. But really when it comes to spatial audio, unless you're specifically hearing it because you have a variety of sounds happening at once, they do have that. But I do tend to like working in WAVs, especially when it's a lot smaller. But if you're having big, massive audio files and lots of channels, it's going to take up a lot of memory. So in real-time environments, we're trying to keep it really small and tight. So I've got some basic loops that I'm going to be bringing into my little sonic environment, but we're understanding that this is spatial audio. So it's as you got stereo, we have the left channel and we have the right channel. With spatial audio, we can put the sound right there. So there's a lot of fun that you can have with this stuff, but just understanding that there's different ways that we can set up the sound. The thing that we are probably going to have to remember is this 48 kilohertz 24-bit. I'll tell you where to put that in. Your door might be different, but there should be a point for that to stick in. Really, it's going to bounce the file if it's not got that. And the other part is making sure that the loudness is right, because you don't want to blast the ears off people. So some good practice on making sure that you normalize your audio by keeping it with under a certain luff amount. So it's sort of a way to measure loudness of a sound. So the three main file types that we can bring in, we have a mono, we have a stereo, and we have an ambisonic. So this usually relates to one channel of audio. So think of one of the speakers is working. You have stereo, so there's two channels of audio, so left and right speaker. And ambisonic actually is a theoretical 4 speakers behind you. So it's usually 4 channels, but it creates that sort of atmosphere of sound around you. And there are special microphones that do that, but typically you would probably have access to mono and stereo, maybe doing some tricky things like I do in this back room with synthesizers. But with this one, understanding that mono is really good for that positional sound. So if you got a sound in place, so if you want someone to hear something over behind the camera, you can put the sound over there. You don't want to do this with stereo because you're having 2 channels doing this one point and you're wasting 50% of the memory. Stereo channel is really good for sound effects and that's happening. It's called diegetic, so outside of the environment, but when you have music playing and it's got a particular pattern, you can just play it in the player's headspace, or sound effects that are menu clicks and that, you can do it through that. So it has a lot in this portal part. I will copy it and put a link in the description below so you can go through it, because there's some really nice bits of information that will really help you understand how these file types work. But that's the main stuff I wanted to cover, so enough about that. Let's jump into my door. So I've got all the sounds nicely labeled, nicely named, keep that file name convention and that. And this is Reaper. So this is the main way I use my DAW for sound effects, loops, maybe some music, but really this has a really good way of managing and exporting out sound files, because each one of these I can export on their own part. So if you're not using Reaper, then I'll try and explain it so you can find the right part for your DAW. But what I want to do is just make sure I've selected everything and go file and render. So this is usually like the exporter or way that we can get the sound out. So one thing I will do is turn tail off, because these are loops I've already processed. They got a nice little transition point, and I want to give it a good name. But because I've done the work inside the DAW, I got some tricky stuff. I can go $item, and that's going to name it there. So next, I'm going to start with WAV. So we've got the WAV file type selected here. The ogvorpus is down there. And really, you got to understand your DAW. It might have those, it might not. WAV is pretty common. ogopus, sometimes it's hidden away, so you need to go find it. And that 24-bit PCM, so that's the other part. So I can set up a secondary export. So I can set it up with that ogopus. So I have the choice between the two. And just checking the file type, it should tell us here. It's pretty much, you don't touch any of the settings in Reaper. That's pretty much ready to go now. So all I need to do is hit render, and that's going to export out those two files for me. I just have it put out to somewhere else because I've already done the work. The file types here. So we're going to bring it into Meta Horizon. So I'm currently running version 2.11 that's just released, but version 2.10 was the version that released these sound files, so you can bring them in and import them. So if you're not familiar what I'm building, if you're familiar with like uranium waste and trying to hide it for 10,000 years, Fallout 76 did it. There's a few other concepts, but really comes from a paper way back when they tried to design this sort of eerie environment to keep people away for a very long time. So I really wanted to experience that with my own eyes, maybe digitally. I can't get that much cement. And I'm going to talk more about this environment on my immersive Ace Jams channel, because I think that's a lot more fitting over there. But the sound spot, we have this wall of sound emanating from the center of our environment. So as you can see, I've got stacked on top of each other. These are all spatial audio sounds, so the person's going to hear it and be pointed in that direction. But to create a wall of audio, like here's a sneaky tick, if you stack them up like this, your sounds will start blending between each other, but it'll be focused like a line up and down. So it's not like you can hear a point very specifically, but like a column of sound. So it's one of those sneaky tricks. But how do we get that audio in here? So what I've done is for my worlds, I might create new worlds in the future, who knows, but I've got it set up so all the stuff for that world is together. So that's a 3D model, and then I have my sounds here. So I've imported some, but to show how to import the sound, what you want to do is go add new and audio. It'll tell you which parts here that you need to do, and then you'll use this to navigate to where the audio is and import it. If it has an issue, it'll flag up red. If not, you'll be hunky-dory, it'll load it up, and then you'll be able to drag and drop it into your scene like that. So we could stop the tutorial there, and really that's how you import a sound, but that's not really useful. How do we actually go about making sound? So I gave you that tip before about this wall of sound, and like I did have some fun. I used my analog synthesizer here to create some very analog gritty textures to make it like a drone that starts out, and it slowly gets more and more chaotic as you get closer. There's like Geiger counter sounds and all that sort of stuff, all emulated from a lovely little synthesizer. So that was my fun. But when it comes to spatial audio sound design, it's a whole different field, and especially when you're in a headset, it feels very different as well as like on a computer or a PC. But these sort of environments, they all work around the same principle that you can pinpoint a sound like that. You can make a sound buzz in someone's head, or you can create an atmosphere around them. So this is where those file types come in handy, as well as some of the features down this column. And we'll start from the start. So we can use play to sample our audio. So as you can hear, it's that Geiger counter sound. So that'll be a very good positional sound. So right there. You have loop, so with this sound it just continually runs, but if you don't have that checked, once it's finished it'll stop playing. So you want to check loop for this one. Play on start, so sometimes you go write some TypeScript to get this up and running, but you can set that one so it plays on start, so you don't have to worry about the volume. This is how loud the sound is in the background, so if it's too abrasive you can tone it back here, but using the LUFS or normalizing the audio. It puts it sort of at a peak loudness, and then you can control it in here. So this becomes the authoring. Volume randomness, so this is more that TypeScript stuff where you're repeatedly playing the sound. You can do a little bit of a pitch shift or a little bit of a volume shift. Pitch shift is down there, and it can vary up the sound, so it could be just one sound like a footstep, but pitch shift and volume shift, you can create a variety of different sounds and textures from that, so it doesn't sound like you're just repeating the same sound over and over. Pitch, you can control how high pitch or low pitch like this is, and this works in cent. So like if you're familiar with a keyboard, you want to type in 12 here, and that should play at double the octave. And then if you go -12, that'll be that. So if I put 1, and then if I put 0, so then we can play it like a keyboard inside of it if we wanted to. Now, global audio. So if you've got a stereo sound that you want to just buzz in the person's head, so maybe it's alert or like a menu click item, you can set this up like that, and that will happen no matter where you are in the world, but everyone will hear that. There's some tricky stuff that you got to do to get multiplayer sound to sound only to one person, but when you're doing ambisonic stuff, so maybe you got an overarching drone texture, like I'm pretty sure I've got one here set up, so that is a very low deep tone. It might not work on headphones, but it is there. It does have the sound, so you can use that to create a sort of field texture. So if you've got a special microphone, I have a Zoom H2N, you can go out into the field and capture 4 channels of audio. So you have like your north, your south, your east and west, and it creates like an audio bubble that you can bring into your environment. So that's really handy for some things. Minimum distance and maximum distance. So I use this as a mechanic for this environment. So as you can see, I've got this wall of sound, and it starts off relatively the entire field, but as you get closer, the sounds will start stacking on top of each other, adding to the volume and adding to the experience when you get really close to the center point, which is a little bit of a hidden thing. So if you want to go find that, I'll leave a link down below so you can go and visit this world if you want. But yeah, you can control this, and I think the maximum distance was only 1,000, which made me a little bit sad because I have a 4-kilometer area that I was trying to close. But the more you learn by doing and trying things out, and you can have a send message as well. So if you're doing some TypeScript stuff, you can flick this back to the thing to say, hey, the sound is done, continue running the script. So just with all of those, you can set up a variety of different sounds. Maybe you're wanting something, so when the user does something, it sort of feedbacks on them. And like having these visual environments are very impressive, but sound itself is such an important part of the user experience, especially in VR. Like you really see through the eyes of who you are in those environments. So having multi-sensory inputs, very fancy word for being able to see and feel inside these environments and hear what's going on, you're going to have a good time. So I hope this has helped you out. If you're looking to bring sounds into your meta horizon, like there's a little bit more housekeeping, but when you can create sound effects and environments that really add that flavor to your space, it's going to improve it so much. So I'm going to leave the VR stuff for my other channel on Immersive HJam. That's really where all this stuff is going to go. But if you're more interested in the machines behind me and sound design and music and all that good stuff, I do have a nice little channel here where I've showcased all my music journey and all that sort of stuff. So if you're looking for that, I look forward to seeing you next time.